bring my phone out because I'm not sure I fully understand what the company does, but he'll explain it to us. But Bernardo is the president and founder of Halo Labs, which is a scientific instrumentation company that commercializes high throughput biopharmaceutical quality control tools using the latest optics, image processing, and microfluidics.
Nice. Good job copy-pasting that.
Yeah, exactly. Bernardo did his undergrad at UCSB, and he did his doctorate at Cornell. So if you give him a warm University of California welcome.
Laptops open, please close them.
Oh yeah, my bad.
Thank you.
So I just heard this is a one-unit class, and everybody here volunteered to come. Sorry, but we'll just do the best we can here. And the other thing that Olivia was telling me is that this is about reflection. I think very Berkeley. Hopefully you get a lot of reflection from me. So I've been an entrepreneur basically ever since I put a sports jacket and you get your logo on. That basically makes you an entrepreneur, right? It doesn't really take a whole lot more. For about 67 years now. And my path was, so I studied engineering. I then went to grad school. How many of you guys here are considering going to grad school? I thought everybody was going to have their hands down and say, no, I'm just going to start a company. But anyway, good luck. And I was basically, I really loved engineering. I went into making nano-scale devices and in widgets at Cornell. And I really came across the opportunity of entrepreneurship and really learned about it very late on when I was, well, I guess you guys are probably 18, but by the time I was about 25 years old or so. And I took the opportunity just because it just felt amazing at the time. And there's one thing that I would really want you guys to take home is that right now you're at a very low risk stage in your lives, and if you're ever going to do something amazing that may or may not work, worst comes to worst, you guys are going to live in your parents' house for you, and it'll still be fantastic. So really do take this precious opportunity of time and the really amazing age that we're living with, that people really collaborate and want you to be successful in whatever entrepreneurial activity you may undertake. So I am in the very fancy space of scientific instrumentation. You can think of it as just fancy microscopes. And we sell fancy microscopes to people in pharma who need to inspect materials for quality control. So just like there's quality control in all parts of life, pharmaceuticals, you need to make sure they're pristine when they are injected to you or when you inhale them, because otherwise they can make your body either reject a drug or kill you. So that's kind of where we came in. But that's actually where we ended up. But it's not really where I started. And if anything, over the last 6-7 years, I've gotten, in my company, we've gotten a lot of things wrong. So if anything, this is more like pouring my heart out, look at all of these mistakes that I made. So hopefully you guys can learn that, hey, it's okay to make mistakes. You can learn from them. And most importantly, if you're not making mistakes, you're probably there's something that's going wrong, because it's almost impossible, to get everything right on the first try. If you guys, how many of you guys want to start your own companies or join a startup at some point? Cool. So I think the key to that, and particularly if you're at an executive level, is to be passionate about what you do, but never really drink your Kool-Aid too much, because you can make a lot of mistakes that way. And make sure that you ask, the people, your customers, what do they really care about, and what do they think about what you're bringing to the market or your service. And again, I really try to do it. So this is a story of two companies, and they're both, I'm cheating because they're both the same company, they're my company. It's just that one company died. And with it, probably a piece of my soul died during this transition, but it came with a lot of reflection, a lot of learning. And I'm very excited to share that with you guys today. So we're technically a biotech company, so we sell equipment to, in the life science field. We sell it to pharmaceutical companies, we used to sell it to academics. We don't make medical devices, right? So we don't make implants, we don't sell diagnostics or something that could tell you if you're sick or not. And we don't make therapeutics, so we don't make drugs. But we make the devices that ensure that all of those things work when it comes to compliance. So there's a couple of reasons for that, and it was really exciting because I come from the, making things, right? I made little gadgets at Cornell, I made devices. And one attractive thing about getting into instrumentation and making these kinds of devices is that you can get into the market, the biotech market, as you guys may have heard, there's a lot of regulatory barriers that make a lot of sense for them to exist. Otherwise, you can't just create the Yo app and expect that, there's necessary, barriers that you have to cross to make sure that you're dealing with people's health. And when you forget that, you become thorough. So, I spun out this company in 2001 based on our research at Cornell. Most of what's funded me has been grants, so that's one of the things I'll talk about today. I don't know, have you guys had any discussions about fundraising? Have some people ever talked about fundraising? So I'll talk a little bit about, how do you capitalize a company? Let's say, okay, sure, I have an idea. How do I get some money? Because I come from the science world, there's a lot of government grants that make that possible, and I also had some venture capital available. So we literally made, I don't know, have you guys ever watched Star Trek before? We're at Berkeley here. I gotta get some hands. No? Well, I got one. That's good. So there's this concept of the tractor beam that you can literally shoot a beam of light and you can capture an object at a distance. You see it in Star Trek, you see it in Star Wars. And we basically made the best tractor beams, right? And we were using tractor beams to analyze materials, to move materials, used for basic understanding of material properties. It was really cool. In my field, it was very popular. And we basically commercialized this, right? And it had all of the latest technologies that grad school could ever concoct, right? Photonics, microfluidics, you name it. And we were really good at analyzing and manipulating, studying very, very small things. You guys may have heard of nanoparticles, but they're basically tiny little speckles of dust. Most of the paint in your walls is made out of nanoparticles. Proteins can be considered nanoparticles, inkjet donor, you name it. And we had this really cool way of measuring these and give researchers new understanding of how these things work. Because it was a fundamental research tool. And we did a lot of market research, and it looked like everything was going to be great. Hey, I got this cool little instrument that I just made. These things are everywhere. So technology plus market, hey, I got myself a pitch, right? So off we went. We wrote a couple of grants. It was, again, for making this new instrument, for measuring particles in a new way that allows people to make better products. And, and you sell, this is capital equipment, so you sell every one of these tools for, 50 to 100 grand. And everything is supposed to work out, right? I did my research, my technology is novel. But what ended up happening, and this is something that you've probably heard time and time again with startup, is that it was really a solution looking for a problem, right? The whole thing is, it's something that came out of my lab. It was our baby. I was intellectually tied to it. And so everything from my vantage point was, how do I fit the world to fit this little thing that I just made? And we were somewhat successful, or you could start a company, or okay, we got $5 million, right? So we were stuck selling to, primary research labs. We really struggled commercializing. Nearly ran out of money multiple times. We sold, like over a dozen tools. I almost sold one to Berkeley, and I'm pretty happy that I missed out on that dumpster fire, because we're no longer selling that tool. And because we had this grant funding, I really, really pushing it as hard as I possibly could. And there was basically no stone left unturned, right? We looked at different ways to market it. We tried to find different applications that could kind of fit what this device did. I spoke to different kinds of people. We changed it tons of time. We assumed a lot of R&D risk, but it really wasn't working. And within that, I thought, have you guys heard of what pivoting is? Right? Which is, hey, it's not working out, let's do something else. And I could have sworn, I thought I was doing it, right? We thought we were doing it. We were trying to, hey, let's do something different, right? So we redesigned the tech, we looked for different markets, but it was all within this core functionality, right? I could change it a little bit. I could do some chemistry so that it would measure something else, right? We're talking about tools. I could be more aggressive with the marketing, right? We can go to different trade shows, etc. It didn't really turn out, and we did it. We did it over 2 years, longer than we probably should have. And at the end of the road, this is what almost happened, right? I mean, we almost went under, and we had because we had revenue, our investors really wanted us to see this through. It's like, hey, in biotech, it's very difficult to get to the revenue generating stage, right? Like, just see it through. And we did, but to the point that it just really wasn't working out. So what happened? So the only thing that we had was starting with a solution is definitely the wrong way to go. And we basically had to drop everything, 4 years, $5 million in, and to say, so what do we do now? And that's, there's a lot of reflection there, and a lot of sleepless nights. But, during this process, when I thought I was pivoting, you're asking people, hey, what do you need? Could this fit? Please tell me no. But there were some commonalities that I was hearing. It's like, hey, these bigger particles, not the nanoparticles, but the bigger stuff, we're really worried about that because that's a lot more dangerous. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, but that's big, I can measure that. And you're getting feedback all the time. The question is if you're really listening, right? Or if you're only trying to listen it through, the channel or the funnel by which you want to listen to things, right? Which is, I am putting this thing out. Are you telling me what I want to hear? And so yeah, I had, selective ears. But we did get a tremendous, so when we stepped back, we were getting really good feedback on what people really wanted. So at the end of the day, we collected everything. It's 2 years too late, but we collected all of the information and we looked for all of the commonalities of what our potential customer base was asking from us. And we're like, hey, getting this market of biopharmaceuticals, which is protein drugs, there's a lot of issues related to contaminants, right, particles. Really look into that. And there were a lot of emerging challenges. It's a very rapidly growing market. And they're really, they had all these very deficient tools. So we're like, okay, well, let's take a look at that. We ran massive interviews. We interviewed directors, users. And then we basically came out with a fake spec sheet saying, okay, here's a product. It's ready to go into the market. And we got wild reviews like, yeah, I've been waiting for that this whole time. And then we were like, okay, we got some really good feedback now. We've been doing market research for 2 years. We almost went under. We have this fake, minimally viable product, which is just a spec sheet that people say, hey, I'd be excited about that. So then what we had to do was go ahead and build it. So before it was too late, we jumped into this new market. We completely made a new piece of hardware, which is quite complicated. It's a new product, and we changed the name from Optofluidics to Halo Labs. It was kind of the rise of the phoenix, in which we wanted to have nothing to do with who we were 6 months before. So there it is, and we commercialized it. And I don't know if you can hear anything here, but if not, oh, it's cool. So I'll just let you guys watch this, and then I'll explain what it is. But basically, this is a fancy crap meter. We measure crap in pharmaceuticals. And this is me singing. So, in this process of discovery, one of the things that we found is that people who were selling, so not only because the tool was really kick butt, but that the way that people were marketing to scientists is like, hey, you're a robot, here's a spec sheet, right? And everybody's an emotional buyer. So we brought in not only amazing technology, but our ability to connect with people to really make their work better. So a little bit more about this market. As I told you, there's in the protein drugs market, so therapeutics. You guys may have heard of Humira while you're watching a football game. There's these drugs that can be contaminants or things about the process that shouldn't be there. And you really want to find those because your body can result in your body completely rejecting the drug to the point that it can generate something called anaphylaxis. So it's like this huge, severe immune reaction where your body goes into complete shock and you die. Or if your body sees something foreign, it just wants to eat it up. So the actual drug that was supposed to be therapeutic, your body just rejected, and it could have been a perfectly fine drug, but because your body essentially digested it, it never got to work, right? So you get a lot of failed clinical trials for perfectly good products, and it's just that they're not sterile. So it's regulated, right? So what does that mean? Pain, right? When you're selling your product, you want people to have a need to do something. And they can do it because they're nice, but if people are against the wall, you're much more likely to get results. And that's why the whole FDA process to get an FDA-approved product is I know that people are sick, and if this is available, then there's a business behind this. Not only, of course, and most importantly, the humane reasons for getting drugs out of the market. So this is a big deal. These contaminants in pharmaceuticals are a big deal. And what we found through all of this research was that there were these really old gas-guzzling instruments that were in charge of doing these measurements. So they consumed a lot of material, and in the way that these processes work is that you want to get insights early, and by the time you can generate a lot of this drug material, you're already very late in the manufacturing process, which means you only will find out if there's crap, contaminants, very, very late. And at that point, you already invested 4 years of research in all of these things when you could have measured this earlier. So we basically make early diagnostics, but for quality control. So if you, instead of requiring gallons of this, you just require microliters. And that's what the Horizon instrument does. And it's also built by techies, so it has a lot of UX. The focus is completely on the user. I think we took that to heart, that if you try to push the technology, it could work. We do work with some inefficient machines, but if you really think about the workflow of the person using whatever you're going to use, and you make it about them, again, it's not about you, it's about them, then you actually get a chance of creating something of value that they will adopt, right? And the key challenge that you have as any startup is adoption, right? Is you got to make people feel comfortable, and it needs to be useful, and that's basically what we did. And then if you compare it with this old dinosaur, right? I mean, they're just snail slow, it looks like crap. The tool, that's what people think that the world should be like, right? And it looks like crap. And it's super slow, and it's a gas guzzler. So we found a lot of frustration, right? You get like these lab techs saying, I can't go see my kids at 5, right? I'm going to be running this guy all night. And you're like, okay, well, what can we do? Or much more fundamentally, hey, I'd like to have access to this information so that I can do something about this. And at this point, they really couldn't until we came around. So very simple value proposition. We're a lot faster, takes a lot less material. So you get to run through all of your experiments, and you get to be home at 5. And as a result, your boss will like you, and your wife won't leave you. So there's key IP, as with a lot of these hardware. We have a custom plates. We filed intellectual property. This is a very intellectual property heavy space. But the key, and I'm sure a lot of you guys here are great with software, it's what distinguishes companies from before now is that you can do a lot of really neat things with software, right? Intelligence, accuracy, speed, usability, and we basically use that to our advantage when people were building these other tools using, Windows 95. So if there's one thing that I'd like you guys to get is if you start your own company or work at a company and you realize, hey, this isn't really working out, that's perfectly fine, and you might never get it right. But I think the key lesson here is to be willing to change your product, right? It's like, okay, I got it wrong, but more important than just these, if you want to learn from my 2 to 3 years of just fumbling, it's not just about reinventing your product, it is really about reinventing yourself. It's like, okay, I got this wrong, right? What am I good at, right? What do people want? And that is a much more profound thing than just tweaking your product a little bit. So when you hear pivot, don't think I'm going to tweak my product a little bit. It means I really got to change what I'm doing. I really got to make sure that it helps people. And the successful products are the products that help people, right? Not the ones that sound cool or snappy. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a business behind that, with that very name. But it has to make your life better. It has to make their life better. And just keeping it simple. My first technology was very, very complicated. The second one is also, but the fundamental physics behind it, it's much, much simpler. We're taking pictures as opposed to making tractor beams. So it's not about pushing by technology. It is about pushing for value. And you guys should probably know, I mean, he teaches here, right, with Steve Blank, right, the whole customer-driven product development. If you guys get a chance to study that guy, he's a genius. I really take what they say by heart, which is, again, it's not about pushing product, it's about doing very rapid iterations and learning what people want and trying to get that to them and get honest feedback. And ask questions the way that that it feels uncomfortable is like, tell me what you don't like about this, right? As opposed to tell me what you like. Make it possible to get real feedback, because time is the most important thing and the most important asset you have. So getting good feedback that might hurt your feelings, you'll be over it after you do it a few times, and you'll be much better off. So takeaways, go ahead, make some mistakes. It's perfectly fine. Learn from those mistakes, and don't have selective listening, and just do it. Get out there and have some fun. Another aspect, so that's the story of pouring my heart out, saying I got all of these things wrong, but you guys just told me that you're interested in potentially starting a company, right? And one of the most common questions or things that come up is, okay, so that sounds great. Well, how do I fund it? Hey, how do I get any money for this? So have you guys had any speakers talk about how do you fund a startup or something along those lines? And basically my take is, if you have a gigantic opportunity, venture capital, it's amazing, raise $100 million, it's the right thing. But there's different kinds of ways in which you can get something off the ground. One of them is, of course, what they call sweat equity. You do it for free, you do it on your own time, you start it, right? You're not paid. And that's one of the most powerful ways of doing something, right? Because at some point people take their salaries for granted, right? And you just but at the beginning, the most important thing is, and always, it's to contribute, create value. So revenue is another one, right? Okay, you're getting money for whatever it is that you're trying to build or you build. Another one is equity, right? Which is when people buy a percentage of your company with given terms and they get X percentage and whatnot. You can get equity from your mom and dad and your grandma. There's also, your very well-established venture capitalists, right? These guys are typically on the later stages. And somewhere in the middle you have angel investors, which can be somebody who is a rich owner of a pizza parlor to somebody who has field-specific expertise in your space. You might be able to get a loan from a bank or again from your family. Something that's very popular is what's called a loan equity hybrid. It's called a convertible note. So it has some elements of loaning and equity and ownership, which means that, why did they do that? Because if it's considered debt, you don't have to talk about valuation. So let's say I have a good idea, I get a team, got some mock data that says, hey, this is really going to work. How much are you worth at that time? Well, the answer is anywhere between 0 and not that much. But in order to not get crushed during investment, there's something called a convertible note, in which you treat it almost like a loan. Hey, I'm going to give you $500,000, but I'm not going to tell you that I own 80% of your company, right? Which could happen very early on. And they're like, we're going to push the valuation question until the next round. But in the meantime, I'm going to charge you interest because it works like a loan, and then it can convert to equity. All of these, with the exception of revenue and sweat equity, involve somebody else owning a piece of your company. And that is perfectly fine, right? If anything, that can be a great thing. If you want to have somebody that has field-specific expertise in what you do, getting them vested and having ownership, that's fantastic. Sometimes it's great if investors own a big chunk of your company, right? If you don't know what you're doing in that space, or B, because they're very well connected and they're going to be vested in you. So treating people taking ownership of your company is a bad thing. Yeah, it can go sour, of course, but that's what you usually need to find the right people. And then there's this other bucket that really never gets talked about, and that's grants, right? Which is you write a proposal to some sort of granting agency, whatever it might be, and they give you money to do a project. So there's kind of beautiful because there's no equity there. They give you the money, and almost there's no strings attached, right? As long as you do a bona fide effort of getting it to work, it's equity free. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because is everybody here, who's here in engineering? Life sciences? Who's here in non-technical field? Cool. Arts? Great. So, there's grants for pretty much anything that you can imagine. And just as let you know, so there's this small business research grant they're about $2 billion. So the government puts about $2 billion in just grants for small businesses to do technology every year. And it's pretty sizable because, you know, the whole venture capital industry is about $40 billion a year, which is not that much. And about 90% of that $4 billion is, you know, follow-on rounds for Uber, right? Which makes a very small piece of the pie really addressable to the early stage companies, right? Which is why early stage companies you go to early stage groups, angel investors, right? That's what's more common, right? That's because, you know, most of the venture goes to the later stage companies. So it's pretty interesting. You know, if you guys want to take a look at that, that's really what paid rent. Make sure that the light was on for us as long as it was. And it's non-dilutive, so the government doesn't take equity. There's tech validation, right? So if you get one of these grants, they're like, hey, you know, there's got to be something behind this technology, right? And then, you know, the chance of getting it it's a lot of work, but the chances of getting them are actually quite high. If you compare it to the number of VCs that you have to pitch to get money, you know, you're looking at 20, 25, it depends, right? But here, you know, you get 10% is on the low side of things, right? So it's a lot of work, but the odds are high. There's like with everything, there's some clear downsides. So like it's a sea of red tape, which is good to do it with like an academic that will do something like that for you. But in your guys' case, you know, the government is vested in saying, hey, I put in a ton of money into universities. I want to see a lot of what they're doing there, you know, come out into the marketplace, right? So I kind of wanted to leave you with that in the reflection / here's some ways that you guys might be getting some money. So, you know, with that, I'll take some of your guys' questions.
For your first company, you said that you made a solution before knowing the problem. I'm curious as to like why you designed that in the first place if you didn't think there was a need for it, or you didn't know what the need was. Because
I went to grad school, which is what the first question that I started with. So it's more complicated than that, in that sometimes you don't know that it's a solution looking for a problem until it's evident, right? And that's part of the reflection that goes with it. So the most important thing is to make sure that you ask people and take care of what you're doing. So, and you can do that very, very early on. What happened with me is I was in a highly technical field where everybody that I spoke to, that was my little universe, right? So I was like, hey, if I could do this, would that be cool? And they said, sure. And then I built it, and I ended up having a market of like 30 people. So yeah, it worked for some people, but it didn't really work for the rest of the world. And then at that point, when I ran out of people, you know, my 30 to 100 people in my potential market space, and I started to try to open it up, I couldn't, because particularly with hardware, it's a lot harder to pivot, right? Because you're kind of locked in. There's a lot of research and things that go into that. So what I'm saying is, like, be on the look to make sure that you don't drink your own, you know, Kool-Aid, that you're really trying to listen to what people tell you. And it's not, hey, I'm an amazing full stack developer and I can do that, 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 that. And if that's how you're treating things, as opposed to, here's a problem that I'm really going to solve. So it's not to come at it from the technology standpoint, but from the value standpoint. For some people, it's obvious, but if you're ingrained in technology, it's not, because that's not how you're wired. So if you don't have that problem, that's a really good thing not to have.
When you had to pivot and you were kind of like a few $1 million in terms of investments, what happened to those investors? Were they interested in staying with you, or did they leave?
It was tough. Because we had $4 million in grants in, we had $1 million in venture, and we had about close to $1 million worth of product. So calling it quits at that point, we had 4 years of inertia. Right? No, actually they were, at the beginning, you know, like the first 30 or so board meetings were very difficult because it just looked like, okay, the clock is ticking until these guys disappear. They've been in those rooms before, right? It happens all the time. And it was the kind of thing that we just had to will it to be true. Where you're like, hey guys, this is not working. We have to do this. So it's a choice between dying or try again. Some people say, hey, I've already been with your company for 4 years. You know, I've had enough. I want to look at somebody else who's more interesting, and that's perfectly fine. But we have some really we had some really good people. We were very lucky. They stuck with us, and right now, the new product, we're kicking some serious butt. So it's a good turnaround from where we were before. So, but yeah, some people can claw back, right? It just depends also what your agreements are. You can get clawbacks if they find that you oversize the market or whatever. There's some risk that comes sometimes with taking money.
How big is your team right now?
We're 15.
Did your team remain the same throughout your transition, and if so, how did they react to changing the direction of the company?
Yeah, so it remained the same and then it grew a little bit more. It was really hard, particularly for the R&D and the hardware scientists, which is, hey, I built this, it was a rocket ship, right? Like I built this, right? I have all of my intellect, all of this hard work went into that. And you just show up and say, guys, we got it wrong, we got to build something new. It was really hard. It was even hard for us to emotionally detach from that. But the most amazing thing is if you fast forward like a year and a half, and right now you see the other product really taking off and people asking for it, and you can just feel the energy, and they go to the demos or the installs, and they now get to see that all the hard work that they did is actually paying off. So it was really difficult, and they also didn't really want it. They kind of wanted us to kind of keep it in the back end, and that inertia is one of the reasons why we didn't chuck it, 2 years before. So it's hard, but sometimes it's like you just got to rip it off. And we did risk people leaving, but we had a really cool culture. People enjoy coming to work in spite of those changes, so that helped. If you don't have a place that people want to work in, they will leave.
How long did it take for things for you to realize that the momentum was shifting with this new product and things were going in an upward direction?
It's a good question, and I'm asking, and I asked, but it was like six months. So when we launched it, 1 month later, just the kinds of conversations that we were having with prospects was, you're for real, right? I mean, we're there to sell you something, if it's of value. So I've been doing this for 6 years, and the awesome wave, we've only had it for about 4 months. And it feels completely different. It feels like it's always challenging, but the kinds of challenges that you have change. It's, hey, how do I meet manufacturing demand? How do we tighten up our IP? How do we get all of these different processes in place? How do we keep learning, right? How do we don't become just a sales organization, but really keep innovating and making products that people like? So it's still a boatload of work, but the questions that you're addressing are much more interesting. And the conversations that you have with your customers are much more, I don't know if the word is friendly, but it's, you kind of feel when somebody's being polite, because nobody likes to say, no, that's a terrible idea. Even that would probably be the best thing that could happen to you early on. But then you can just feel how genuine it is, right? And it's literally about fine tuning, and you feel it, right? I mean, you're no longer just pushing and trying to fit with a square peg in a round hole.
So for the 2.5 years, like, did you have a part-time job or something like that? Like, because you barely made any profit, right? So.
Grants. So we basically that's one of the reasons why I talked about it. That makes sure that everybody, we've never missed a paycheck. And that is, well, except for the first 4 months that I was working with sweat equity, I guess, until the grant kicked in. But no, that's one of the things that we really pride ourselves in, is that, none of our employees ever had to miss a paycheck, and the grants, helped. But there was some serious risk. So what I was doing is, we still kept trying to make the product better until we let it go, and I did use the time to just ask questions, right? So business development is just fancy talk for getting candid feedback of what people really think about what you want to do, right? And my questions changed from what do you like versus what do you not like. And when I started doing that, and I really started listening, I think it's when we, maybe a couple of years too late, but when we started to turn the corner.
Did you have a prototype of your second device when you filed for IP, or was it just an idea that you got it?
So that's interesting, right? So if you push with technology, everything you think about is intellectual property, right? How do I get this right? But then when you go from the market side, it's like, okay, I'm going to find a solution that meets these needs. And you'll find, because there's a market for that, but there's overlapping, partial solutions or semi-cooked solutions for that. So it is a little bit more challenging if you go that route. So then, I do recommend working with intellectual property lawyers for when you come to that. But really think about, what is to remove yourself a little bit from the technical side, but what is the business that you're trying to protect, right? Because you can spend all your time creating intellectual property and filing and working with lawyers for patents and trademarks or whatever, for something that's not worth protecting. So you start thinking, what is the business that I want to protect? What is the core technology that protects that enables that business? And then you work backwards. I think one good message to tell you is to not just go about things organically, but to try to work, let's call it deduction, right? To try to and start with a goal in mind and then say, okay, what are the things that I need to do to get there, as opposed to just push it through. And then in our case, we find that the algorithms were pretty important, the kinds of light sources that we use, the configuration of those compared to what our competitors were doing. You do something called a freedom to operate analysis, which is you evaluate all the other guys' patents and you're like, okay, what are the holes, right? Where do we fit in? So yeah, it's an effort that's led by technology, business decision, strategy, and IP assessment.
Any more questions? All right, thank you so much.